Welcome back to another episode of Me, Myself, and I, an official confession stand podcast. And despite alligators and airplanes, Sam, what else will we be talking about today?
We are going to be reading the end of part 2 of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. It'll be chapters 38 through the end of 50.
A lot of pages.
But they really kind of flew. I was a little nervous, typing up the notes, getting everything organized of what we're going to talk about. It feels like a lot, but each chapter was kind of alternated between being really meaty with important stuff and just a fun little training chapter with Emery, Nesta, and the rest of the crew.
The girls. I'm so excited for the girls to train together.
Sarah, where do we leave off with the last couple chapters?
Let's see if I can remember this.
Oh gosh, our last conversation.
Got a little heated, on several levels, because the last thing we talked about was Cassian and Nesta doing it, and our opinions on the matter. And I'm trying to think if anything else came up in the last chapters. We know that Feyre gonna die because she has a baby with wings, the Illyrian wings,
but she doesn't know.
But she doesn't know, because Rhysand thought the best thing to do was to keep that from the person whom is going to experience it. So that was smart. We also saw Nesta come out of the bog, and she got the mask, which is one of the items of the Deadly Dread Trove. And so we got the mask, so the crown and the harp are still on the loose, or at large. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else significant that we talked about in the last section. I think those are the big ones. So Nesta got that out of the bog and killed the Kelpie. And then Sam's favorite line in the whole book, which is Cassian leaving Nesta after they do, and he's like, "Thanks for the ride, Ness." But I think that's important because it's him drawing a line, because they have discussed this. The communication is very good in the sense that this is just the sex. This is just for babangs, and that's it. So no cuddling, no nothing. And Nessa's feeling kind of sad about that.
So Carbs, how are you feeling now after reading this section?
I may have been a little too sensitive when I read it, and I may have jumped to a conclusion that I may or may not still support. That's my bullshitting way of saying I might have been wrong.
Oh, look at that! Who would have thought? Not Sam.
I don't know what it was about that section when I read it that I got so emotional about, but
that's the beauty of books. You feel things that you're not anticipating to feel, and sometimes things trigger you when you're least expecting it.
But I think you guys were right that it was... What I was bothered by it ultimately is the lack of romance, and I am such a stickler for romantic stuff, and I love romantic stuff, so to not have that was a little disappointing for me. And yeah, and I just think I related to Cassian in that moment, because I've certainly been in that position. It was tough to kind of see that different perspective, or that reverse perspective of it. But yeah, I may or may not consider recanting my statement. We'll see. It's not. We literally just finished part 2, so I'm not willing to recant it just yet.
I will wait for the glory in the last episode. It's all good. It's all fine. I'm willing.
Well, Sam, want to take us away on this episode? Where do we go from there? Oh my gosh, I forgot to introduce ourselves. You guys know who we are. That was totally my bad. I was so into talking about alligators and airplanes.
I've been waiting so long to tell people who the hell I am.
You know what? I'm leaving this in. I'm not even going to edit it. Well, this is one of your hosts. I'm Hannah/Spuds.
I'm Sam Swags.
Sam Swags.
And I'm Sarah Carbs. You're welcome.
But anyway, Swags, where are we going from here?
Oh my gosh, we have our own little training session now at the House of Wind. There are now 11 priestesses training that Azrael had to come in and start helping. So it's kind of Cassian training the 3 OGs, so Nesta, Gwen, and Emery, while Az is taking all the newbies with the balancing and all the basic core work and all of that. Cassian, though, after roping Az in, realized he should have cleared it with Gwen, because Az is the one that saved Gwen from the temple. So that was almost a kind of awkward moment for, I think, at least Gwen. I feel like when we were reading that section, Az didn't really seem to like react. I'm sure he remembered her, but he's not reacting to her the way that Gwen was reacting to him.
To be fair, Azrael doesn't really react to anything other than the High Lords meeting.
Be careful how you speak to his high lady.
He reacted to Moore, and because it was the comments to Moore and it was the comments of Pharaoh, wasn't it? It was for both of them.
Yeah, but other than that, he doesn't really react to much else in the world.
Nope, he's just a really good wingman. Wink.
But what's really funny is that Emery and Gwen almost immediately pick up on the additional layer of tension between Nesta and Cassian, which is really funny because they start training with swords, and of course Nesta and Cassian are not talking about swords, but they are.
I feel like it'd be hard to miss that tension.
Oh, I know. It was obvious even before all that happened, but no one else was willing to say, or they just didn't have a relationship with Nesta to say anything before that point. Because Nesta called Gwen her friend. It was really cute.
I know, they're friends now. I love this so much for Nesta.
I got so choked up, man.
I know. She had that, like, stopping that intrusive thought of, like, oh, wait, this girl's actually kind of my friend. It was really cute. Good for her. And they've also been spending a lot of time starting to learn all the Valkyrie training tips. The first lesson they start going down a rabbit hole of what was essentially meditating. They start meditating to clear their minds. And Nesta realized how helpful it's been to stop her chattering, anxious brain.
Oh yeah, come through self-help queens, banding together and meditating and training self-defense. I love this for them. We should really do this together.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh, if you guys took me to a class where you guys were banging the instructor, I would totally do what Gwen and Emery are doing to both of you. Like, I would be so obnoxious. I'd put out so many innuendos. You wouldn't survive.
You would.
I would, 100%. I mean, in fairness, I do think the both of you would do it to me.
Oh yeah, 100%.
100%.
Full stop.
But I really like how, because it's not just they're learning the Valkyrie stuff, they're sort of combining it with the Illyrian training, because we don't know too much about what's left of the Valkyrie practices and techniques. So it's this is sort of a hodgepodge of the two of them together. But I think about how important breathing is. I love that whole section. Han, Spuds, you just got me into that physical 100, and there's this great point in this television show where the strength training was they had to hold up a bust of their torso, and if it fell to the ground they were eliminated. And there was this one girl who was able to hold on longer than everyone, and she's this little tiny ass thing, but she just said that what kept her going was she just focused on her breathing instead of how the weight was coming down on her.
She just went into a trance almost. She just straight started meditating. It was really cool to watch.
People kept commenting about like how calm her face was, and you think about,
like, she looked like a statue.
She did. Well, and I've even heard when monks are in, I don't know if it's called training, but when they're in monkhood, they can regulate their breathing to the point where they can change their body temperature on one side of their body. It could be hot on one side and cold on the other side. Just crazy stuff you can do just by starting with the breath and controlling your breath. It's just so cool when you really look into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You hear those people when you're worked up, someone always says, take a breath or whatever. And I feel like a lot of the times that advice always goes over everyone's head because it's really hard to calm down. But the funny thing is, if you were to actually step back from any type of situation and focus on your breathing and just regulate your body, you're probably going to calm down. But yeah, also, I want to take time to appreciate the fact that while all of this stuff is going on, I have a new appreciation for Cassian and Azrael and watching them teach these women. I don't know what it is about it, but I mean, you see them with the Illyrians and you see how brutal and stuff they are, but watching how thorough they are with the women and respectful, I don't know. I may or may not have become an Azrael fan out of nowhere.
What?
The gasping.
Oh my goodness. I was going to say what I do love about their training technique is they're not coddling the priestesses. It's not like they're making it easier for them. It's still the same training, but they're very firm and fair about it. It's not like, oh, this is our training for women. No, this is
Mhm.
Illyrian training. But we're just, there's also the acknowledgement of these women have been through some really difficult things, in particular with men. So just how they approach it in this way that's non threatening, but also very firm and straightforward, I think is brilliant.
Well, the men are taking their ability to train these women very seriously, which I think is
Yeah.
what I respect the most, is that it isn't, "Oh, I need to walk on eggshells or whatever to do this," but they also recognize all these women not as victims or weak women, but as survivors and warriors in their own right,
Absolutely.
which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree to all of that. And what's really fun is Cass and Azriel doing this on their own time, like no expectations. Nesta's shown interest. She is kind of spearheading it, and Cass and Azriel are supporting her on it, which I really love too. And with all of this training, Cassian takes them, well, at least Nesta's the only one available, on a field trip to see how swords are made.
Oh, this is so fun. I love this part.
So Cassian, finds an old blacksmith that he's worked with in the past. He likes his work, brings Nesta, and tells her that she could take a couple swings at welding, forging the sword together. So she starts forging. So she forges 3 pieces, or assists in forging 3 pieces. It's a great sword, a regular sword, and a dagger. Hearing the description of Nesta banging at it, my arm was hurting just listening. So I don't know if I'm built out for it, but I will definitely hit it a couple times.
We should try it. We should see if we can find a place and go make a sword.
That does
Let's
sound like fun.
go.
Well, I'm gonna go because my boy is the next person we're gonna talk about. It's Lucian makes a surprise appearance, and he is just so shocked at the progress that Nesta has made, to the point where he's like, "Damn!" And what did he say? Like, "God will help us all," or "Gods help us all," something like that.
Yep. Cauldron save us, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. So he was just, I would say impressed, but I think he was also afraid. Is there like a word for being afraid and impressed simultaneously?
I think you can still have those two feelings.
Yeah, maybe. And of course, like Cassian pokes at him, is like, "You're here to see Elaine." He's like, "I'm not just in the city to see my mate." And I thought was really interesting that he still called her his mate, in that, I don't want to say it's like claiming ownership, even though it sort of feels like that. I don't know what you guys felt about it. Because he could have said Elaine, but he's like, "I wasn't just here to see my mate."
I think it's because the mating bot hasn't been, to our knowledge, either accepted or rejected. So they're still in that limbo of that it could be either, I think.
Well, and this is actually something I wanted to ask you about because, for instance, Callias, him and Vivian, they were best friends until he went under the mountain, and then, like, right before he left, the mating bond snapped into place. So there was a lot of, like, mutual love for each other, but the bond didn't happen until they were both like, "Yes, this is the one." But then you have someone like Elaine who's never met Lucian before ever, and then boom, mating bond happens. Doesn't even know this man. And then Feyre, she obviously knew Rhysand. I mean, she had been a Fae for a minute, and then the mating bond happened, but they already knew each other. I don't understand how that works.
There is no science to it. There's no consistent pattern of how the mating bond works, but there is becoming a pattern that people have picked up. I've seen like on Reddit, TikTok, and stuff, that there seems to be something inherently with the male that picks up on it first, and he's the one that has to initiate it with the female. So now,
Oh.
I mean, that's what we're seeing, right? So like Rhysand's father to his mother, we're seeing it with Lucian and Elaine.
So it's always the male that gets the signal, I guess.
That's the running theory, is that the
Okay.
male is the one that inherently knows first. For whatever reason, we haven't really seen much evidence the other direction.
Patriarchy.
Right? Capitalism.
Right, exactly. Capitalism
Anyway.
just swung around by a penis. Anyways, so Lucian's there. La-di-da.
I really liked his line that he said to Cassian watching and Nesta training. I wonder if there are some things that should not be awoken.
Ooh.
You know, I thought that was pretty ballsy of him to say that, because we do see later in...
Why?
Well, no, it's just like we do see later in this section she confronts Tamlin, and for him to say that when he's kind of part of the reason why she is the way that she is right now...
I don't agree with that, though. I don't think he had any choice what Tamlin was going to do.
Okay.
He wasn't part of it.
I thought that him and Tamlin were part of the whole Hybern thing.
No, he was just along for the ride.
I think a lot of Lucian's actions are trauma bonded or just being a victim of Tamlin's wrath in general.
Obviously, Tamlin didn't know that was what was happening. I'm guessing he assumed that Elaine and Nesta were going to be some sort of bartering chip for Feyre, but then Hybern changed his, Hybern was Hybern. He's like, nah, I'm just going to do it this way, and I'm going to threaten you by just changing your sisters 100%. So, no, I guess you're right. I guess we can't put that responsibility on Lucian. That really doesn't make sense.
He's also not the one who threw them in the cauldron.
No, he's not. I mean, neither did Tamlin.
He sold them over to let that happen, though. He set the stage.
Oh, and I forgot. What's her face? Ianthe was also a pretty big... She played a much bigger role in that than Lucian ever did.
Yep. Yes. Full stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then after Lucian makes that comment, Nesta pummels a tree into a pile of cinders as she's sparring.
Well, and his comment, it made me think a lot about how, because they don't understand exactly what Nesta is, but the only thing they do understand is that she's Lady Death. I think Lucian was like, oh no, are we creating a monster? Not Nesta, but more what is inside of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on to that, they end up meeting with... Cassian gets called to the river house to meet with Rhys and Feyre because Helion decides to mosey on over to help them with the Autumn Court soldiers, trying to break whatever charm is on them to see who might have been behind the attack.
Yeah, he's there predominantly to check the soldiers from the bog, because they have this sort of mist around them, and to see if what the influence is and if he can break that spell. And then the other thing, of course, is to have Rhysand talk to him about Feyre's pregnancy. That's another big part of Helion showing up. But what I was going to say is, did you not think how quintessentially Helion it was that he wanted to show up in Valaris with this huge chariot, 20 horses, and just have this, I'm thinking, Ali Ababwa, parade?
He's got style.
Mm-hmm.
Helion.
But then he comes on this gorgeous black Pegasus horse. I don't think I've ever seen a Pegasus type horse black before. I think I've only seen white ones, at least illustrated.
Don't they have a black one in Hercules somewhere?
Not that I remember.
We're thinking of Fantasia in the Beethoven suite. I think a couple of them are dark.
I haven't seen Fantasia in forever. That's one of the few things that I would love to rewatch is Fantasia. I feel like I didn't appreciate it as a kid.
No, definitely not. I don't know why that was marketed for kids.
Oh, yeah. So it was Peter Pegasus. It was the baby Pegasus. It was the young version of Pegasus, and it was black.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
All right, we were both right. Look at us.
I think that is Fantasia. So you were right.
Oh, I was right. Oh, all right. Never mind. I love that Helion paring down his grand entrance was still just one Pegasus, though. That was he still had to bring a little bit of the bling, a little bit of the attention as he rolled up.
Which is like a Rolls Royce in Prynthian.
Right? Well, because he lost. I mean, I think he's less than 20 now. He had most of his Pegasus wiped out by Amarantha. How devastating.
I thought it was 7. It's not 7? Is it 20?
He has 7 left.
I thought he had 7 left.
I think he had 20 before Amarantha then.
Yeah, I think he had like 20 before Amarantha, and then it was, which is horrible. She had killed all of them except for the ones that were in the high tower, and he was able to release them into the sky. And
That's a lot of Pegali.
Yeah, and what's super fascinating about the Pegasus is their original homeland is the same island that the prison is now on.
Creepy.
Creepy.
Just saying.
And the description of him saying that Pegasuses once fed in meadows that had long given way to moss and mist.
Magical.
That's all I have to say. So the one perk about them finally telling Helion about Feyre's pregnancy is that she finally actually gets a little bit of say about her pregnancy. Who would have thought?
Oh my gosh, we love this for her. She actually gets control over her body.
Bodily autonomy. Who would have thought?
It's like such a new idea.
And Prithian, clearly. So Feyre was able to finally put her foot down about not completely glamoring away her pregnancy. I think she still has that bubble around her most of the time, but they're a little bit more relaxed about it. Feyre's not going to cower in a corner over it, which good for her.
Came
as
down
she
in
deserves.
a bubble, dog. Anyway, go on.
It has to be brought up every single time.
Come on, bro!
Absolutely. She was a princess. I mean, Nesta was a witch.
So, and trade, the part of the reason why they decided to tell Helion was not only for his knowledge, but hoping to access his libraries to try to find a way for Feyre to safely deliver their baby. Anyway, so they don't get into that fun stuff. They go down into the Court of Nightmares to meet with the soldiers, and Helion's not a fan of the Court of Nightmares.
Yeah, for real. He's like, I'm too bright for this dark ass place.
He assessed the soldiers pretty quickly, and then when he was done, he's like, he pretty much, he's like, I'm out, I've seen enough. So they pretty much immediately go back to the Moonstone Palace. And he says how nervous he is about whatever that curse is that's on them because it doesn't feel like a curse or a spell. There's no singular spell binding them or adjusting their behaviors is pretty much how he had described it. And that's when they all piece together that Briallen might actually have the crown of the Dread Trove.
How creepy. I love how this book got more dark.
You know what my thought is? I think that Kosjay had the crown all along, and I think he gave it to Briallen, I don't know, like as a sign of goodwill, maybe, or as a way of forging their relationship for mutual benefit. Because I'm just thinking about like how he's chained to a lake, the mask was at the bottom of a bog. You can't tell me that the crown wasn't at the bottom of the lake. So I'm just thinking that we're just going to have to do a lot of diving for these dread troves. And maybe it's that sort of treasure-esque vibe we get from Trove, or like buried treasure-esque vibe. But yeah, I think that Kosjay had the crown, and I think he gave it to Briallen.
He probably wasn't able to use it the way that he wanted to. He's got a perfect little mouthpiece now with her to be able to pretty much do his dirty work so that he can get out of jail free card.
Well, that was the thing, is because Briallen is also made, she can use the crown without the crown having its influence over her, because most humans or fae who wear the crown, it sort of takes over their body, and there's just no way to take it off without killing themselves. So because Briallen is in a similar position as Nesta and Elaine, then she has that ability. So you're absolutely right, Sam. Like, this is the perfect person for Kosjay to conspire with, and this is the big reason why, or what they assume is the big reason why, the remaining queens fled, so that way they wouldn't fall under Briallen's influence if she has the crown. It's not confirmed, but that is the assumption.
Yeah, and so at this point, this is when they decide to pretty much tell Helion everything regarding the Dread Trove, Briallen, and Kosjay. They did leave out the Eris Baron stuff just because that's still under wraps. They don't know where his loyalties lie 100% or his relationship with the Autumn Court. And then they bring him to the mask in question. So he kind of scopes it out. He runs into Nesta again, and they rope her in so that he got very excited to see Nesta, might we add. And she put him in his place. It was such a beautiful little exchange. I loved it.
Such a Nesta.
He loves getting his balls tugged, I'm telling you.
He really does.
Mm-hmm.
And so he couldn't really handle being in the presence of the mask, and was impressed with Nesta surviving using the mask when she did. So he shows her how to lock the mask, but she refuses to learn how to unlock it in case anyone uses her or that knowledge against them. So Reese learns as a backup, which I don't know if Nesta would trust Reese at this point, but in theory, Reese makes sense. In practice, in this moment, would not have been the move. Maybe should have been Farah, but she's kind of like dying, but whatever.
Honestly, same thing. Pregnant, dying, whatever. That's where my priorities lie. You can tell. I'm not a kid person.
But you know what? As much as we're, shitting on Reese over this, he picks up about how good Nesta is with the whole, like, scheming political side of, like, talking with people, that he was really impressed with the way that she didn't back down on Helium. She kind of kept him in his place without being insulting.
I love how he's just now saying this.
I know, right? Cassian has no tact. He's like, you join him moving forward to anything to do with, especially Eris, because Eris is a cheeky motherfucker.
When we find that Eris kind of likes Nesta.
I mean, who doesn't? Clearly, everyone's got the hots for her in this series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing with Farah and all the other books. I think we had a conversation in one of our episodes where we talked about it. We're like, what is it about Farah that's like this weak human girl that everyone just wants a piece of? Anyway.
I just feel like Faye must have this insatiable sex drive. I just think they want to
bang it out.
Everything. I think they bang trees, and that's why we have like nymphs and shit.
I mean, there are lower Fae that are trees, aren't they?
I'm just saying. I think they fuck everything.
They're like hormone monsters.
Like, God forbid a loaf of bread come out of the oven too soon. I'm just saying. Like,
Ew.
So where did we leave off after that?
Okay, so let me see here.
Reese and Faye tell Az to pull his spies back from the Autumn Court and not to keep pressing on the Briallan in case she does not have the crown is influencing his spies. Told not to mention Eris, and he's not happy about it, and he's ready to break command.
Yeah, Az kind of has a temper. He really, no wonder they let him go off and do his, like, shadow shit, because he would never listen to Rhysand ever.
Well, and I thought it was kind of interesting how Rhysand was like, no, it's Feyre's call. That's your high lady, buddy. It's not just me. It's on favor too, so you can't be 100% mad at me. And no, he was really pissed about it. But if Brianna does have the crown, I feel like it's a pretty justified reason.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's very possible that the crown could be like, just pretend you didn't see anything, or compel someone to tell Feyre and Rhysand something, or tell Azriel something that gets passed along, and then it's misinformation. I agree with this tactical decision. I think it's the right call. I understand that Az has done a lot of work, and now, and I'd be pissed too, but I think it's the right call.
Az is kind of flying blind, quite literally now.
Right.
That he was really anticipating as much information as possible, and I just don't think he likes being uninformed.
I agree with that.
But what's really fun is that Nesta kind of low-key hints that she wants to figure out a way to bring the Valkyries back. Because Cassian started giving her more war and tactic books to research. She was showing interest in it. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Do we see that dynamic for her, but also in her relationship with Cassian as, like, two, like, war generals, essentially?
I love her logic around, like, if you're going to train me on how to be a weapon, then I want to know how to not only use it, but to also help other people channel and use it themselves. I think it just shows how she's maturing in how she's thinking about herself and this whole process.
Well, and she's finally kind of adding value to herself.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense that she hasn't ever given herself that type of grace before and seen herself as worthy of anything. And so I think that the Valkyrie in training is kind of giving her this newfound appreciation that she's capable of doing great things.
And I think, too, you know, she's seeing how her mother kind of honed her as another type of weapon in her childhood, and she's seeing the parallels and everything that her mother taught her and what she's kind of learning now, especially on like the more political side of things. So it feels like kind of the perfect combo of what you said. She is going to be the strongest version of herself that she can, while also she's not starting from scratch. And I think that's helpful for her, and it's less intimidating for her to kind of go down this route for herself.
And I couldn't agree with you more on this. And I think it's said a little bit later on in regards to how her mother trained her for this sort of thing. Is Elaine talks about how she felt that Nesta would have been better off being born in Prynthian. She was more made, or she was more sculpted into this tactical, almost warrior. Like she always had this plan in place of how to marry up in like a really strategic way.
It was like she's always been a weapon of some sort.
Right. She's always been this tool, which is unfortunate thinking about it that way. But I mean, in this circumstance, it's actually like playing out for her in a really unique, and I would say,
Well, it's almost like she's reclaiming it
right,
as her own.
exactly.
Well, and then Cass swings by her room to deliver some more training books, and we see a vulnerable side of Nesta. Nesta's kind of thinking that he didn't enjoy having sex with her because she set the boundary and he set the same boundary, and she felt a little icky afterwards.
No, yeah. Well, and they also hadn't gotten together, and like, she's like, was this a one and done thing?
They haven't got together in hours, and she's like, oh no.
He
I'm just
doesn't
kidding.
like me.
Yeah. Nesta's in her feels right now. She's in the age of feelings.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Gross.
Ugh, who needs those?
Stick to being a weapon, honey.
It's your best asset.
I told Spuds this yesterday. So I was listening to this scene as I was driving down because I was driving down from Mount Juliet to my therapy appointment, but they closed off an exit. So I had to like kind of maneuver, and I really didn't know where I was going. So I'm listening to this extremely spicy scene whilst I'm getting directions from Google. So it was like they looked at each other with the promise of passion in their eyes. Take a left in point two. What clear communication! Like,
This is how I like it in the bedroom.
because I was like getting into it, and I'm like, take a left on the Castleman Drive. I'm like, damn it, this is like taking me in and out, and I missed my exit twice. Like, awful.
In and out and in and out.
I was like 20 minutes late for my fucking appointment. I was pissed.
For good reason, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
For the book.
it couldn't be
Priorities.
helped. Couldn't be helped.
Not at all. It's so funny. I feel like every time Cassian gets pulled into the river house, it's just for like bad Nesta news. It's always for like something new that he has to do, or aka Nesta's doing wrong. And guess what did she do this time, guys?
She accidentally put her powers in the sword, dagger, and the great sword that she created when they went to forge the sword. But also, like, how would she have known? She had no idea. It was her first time making a sword. And I love that Cassian goes to the river house and they're like, so you're doing great and all, but like everything is falling apart. Keep going.
I'm not blaming you, but I'm blaming you.
Well, yeah, right. I'm not blaming you, but you fucked up. Why did you take her to a swordsman to forge a sword?
Why would you do something educational and good for her soul? You moron.
We want to rehab her, but we don't want to rehab her. You gotta tone it back a little bit. Don't give her big ideas.
Well, and this is all really cool because we find out that the Fae used to have the power to transfer their abilities, but they haven't seen this in what, like hundreds, thousands of years?
10,000 years is what the book said.
10,000 years. But I mean, it just goes to show Nesta has something inside of her right now that is so ancient that I think none of the people who are currently alive in Prynthian or any of the Fae have probably never been alive to see this actually happen in their lifetime.
The last sword that they've either been destroyed, disappeared, or sunk to the bottom of the ocean, the one named Gwydion, disappeared around the time the troves did as well, which kind of makes sense because they're all kind of like magic made, right? They're all essence of the cauldron. So it's an interesting thing that they all kind of had the same move at the same time.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
So they are super freaked out about this. They don't want to unsheath anything because they don't know what emotion was put into these swords as she was making them.
And it's Nesta, so it's nothing good.
But not only that, she was also traumatized because she's in a blacksmith hut and there's a fire going at all time and she's constantly hearing that crackling noise. And Cassian notes her flinching and asking to be moved to work at a spot that's farther away from the fire and stuff like that. So who knows how that trauma will play into how these blades, or that triggering emotional reaction, will play into the power of these blades.
I'm surprised that Cassian hasn't just went ahead and asked Nesta what's up with the fire.
He's obviously noticed it, yeah.
Because it's also, we love Cassian, but he's such a himbo, like Sam calls him. He always has such a poor choice of words. You think he would just be like, so what's up with the fire and the flinching, you know?
I feel like Cassian has such a good grip on Nesta's personality. It feels like a moot point to ask her anything, especially if it's an emotional reaction, because she will always pivot and just say, I just don't like fire. What of it?
He knows when to pick and choose his battles with her, I think.
Right. And I think that's just one that he's like, nah, I'm going to let her come to me on that one. So, which I think was the right call.
Look at this. Everyone's growing.
We love to see it.
I really love Cassian in this book. I really, really do. He's just not that party fuckboy that we met in the second book. There's just such a maturity and grace about him. I'm just constantly impressed with the actions he takes, how he handles these situations. And I don't think he handles them all perfectly, but I think he has enough humility where he'll admit when he's wrong and he'll own up to it, which I love that about his character.
He's almost, the thing too that's refreshing is that he doesn't always do it perfect, but it's always with good intent, and he almost always catches on to when he does something not wrong, but could have been more tactful. He's pretty self-aware.
But I think what also is important about Cassian, because of his, like you said, he really doesn't have the most eloquent way of talking about things, but I feel like we see with Rhysand, for instance, how he kind of twists things and he sort of has his own, I don't want to say like misdirection, but because he's so elusive, whereas Cassian's so much more straightforward. That's really refreshing in this dynamic, because we're not really getting to the point, and especially with War and High Lords, and they're all playing these stupid ass games with each other on who can get the upper hand. Whereas
he's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. He's not tactful about it, but at the same time, we really need that right now. We need this directness. I think we crave that straightforward behavior.
All right, Sam, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think it's really important to note, I think we need to get back to going into more, because there's a lot of information in regards to these weapons that Nesta helped forge, that the big one, the great sword, it has so much more power than the other two weapons that Amren has essentially now dubbed it a new trove to add in with the collection of the mask and crown and harp and all of that.
Good job, Nesta. You created a whole nother trove that we got to worry about now.
Yeah.
Poor Nesta. She can't catch a break.
No,
I know. So Asriel is now freaked out about people using her, kind of like she had that fear when she was learning how to lock the mask. So then they start getting into a really heated debate. The biggest thing, whether Nesta should be informed of what she did with the weapons.
Oh yeah, I forgot that she doesn't know yet.
They take a vote on it.
They just love withholding information from people that it actually affects. It drives me nuts.
And what's so crazy is that Rhys, initially, it's Amren that makes that suggestion that Nesta not be informed. And Rhys initially didn't think it was a good idea. and he got talked into it by Amren.
It's so funny coming from him.
I know. It was so frustrating. He's like, oh, you almost had this moment, this redemption. Just kidding. You didn't. You messed that up.
Swing and a miss.
I was just going to say, he ends up, as a compromise, he ends up deferring the final decision to Feyre. But I think the whole process of having this vote and this discussion in general is just super inappropriate. And
like, what good comes from it? Let's be real. What good comes from Nesta not knowing what she's capable of doing? In what world is that not dangerous?
And I mean, because it's Rhys and Amren versus Az and Cassian when it comes down to the divide. Az and Cassian are living with her. They are training with her. They are getting to know her. And they're the ones that are probably the most associated, acquainted with her at this point. It's never good to withhold information like that's just a given. But for Rhys and Amren to again be so ill-informed about the progress Nesta's making, to have, because that's probably what the deciding factor is, right? It's not that they want to withhold it, but she's kind of a loose cannon in their eyes. So for them to not listen to the Azriel or Cassian's really frustrating.
I agree.
Yeah, the people who see her every day. But also, wouldn't you just think that if she knows that and she's self-aware that that's possible, if she's having a heated day, that she's not going to, like, paint a picture or something, and all of a sudden there's this magic, crazy, ancient whatever inside of a painting now? Do you think that it would be more beneficial for them to be self-aware, and it would keep Azriel and Cassian safer if she knew?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
My thought is, what's the harm in telling her and then keeping the weapons separated from her? Like getting Helion to put them under some seal or something.
Nesta can do it. She's trained. She could totally lock up those weapons then.
Yeah, like what's the harm in that?
That's a good point. What actually is the harm in telling her? I understand the Feyre situation because Rhys is like, I don't want to stress her out, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not going to stress Nesta out if she knows.
I think the point of it is that
women don't have a right. Sorry.
With her having that knowledge, their argument is her being used as a pawn, I think.
Gosh, it's so crazy because, I mean, this was the same types of conversations that Tamlin and Ianthe were having about Feyre and Mist and Fury before. Like when she became maid and how she has all these powers and she was going to, if anyone else knew, try to mate with her and just all these awful things that could happen instead of just being open and upfront about it. And I genuinely feel like similarly in this situation, I just think that Amren and Rhys are on the outs with Nesta. She's not in their good graces, and this is their bruised ego reaction. That's my 2 cents. Because it really doesn't make sense to me why they would put up such a fight about this. I mean, like, they're 2 of the strongest, most powerful people in this city. There's no reason why Aunt Nesta can't know about this and these items be secured,
Yeah.
I feel like Nesta can understand the gravity of the situation, and I feel like they know that, but this is their need for control.
You know what it is? It's them pulling the Tamlin of treating her like she was before the cauldron.
Right! Exactly. Like this doll, this like would-be bargaining chip. This one grain of rice that'll tip the tides, I just think it's bullshit. I don't like it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
It's definitely not done with the best intentions. So, of course, Amren leaves, and what does Rhys do? Decides to play with the swords, using his magic.
So we're all on the same page that we're not going to touch the weapons.
Wink,
yeah,
wink.
Okay, good. Rhys is like, oh, thank God she's gone now.
Mm-hmm. So they realize the great sword, the one with the most magic, is literally glowing with power out of its sheath. And then the other 2, one, the dagger is like cold, and the sword is hot and angry, are the descriptors of the power that you don't see but you can feel radiating off of it. And then I will say, I still hate Amren, but her like popping back in like, I knew you guys would touch
it.
Rhys is like a child. He's like, I'm not touching it, because it's in his brain.
Yeah. And that's when we learn that there was another sword I don't know why she wrote it out this way, but yeah, Amren somehow gets on the topic of one of the other magical swords that was in Amarantha's care that she either destroyed or disposed of because it wasn't cooperating with her. It was called Narbin. Yeah, so there's probably one sitting at the bottom of the ocean if anyone just wanted to, go for a casual swim. And this one is older than Gwydion.
Which is the sword that went missing with the Dread Trove.
Yes.
Now this sort of opens the discussion for, that Amryn plants this seed that Rhysand should be the High King of Prythian. Easily he could take up that role with this new Dread Trove.
How do y'all feel about this?
It's so stupid. Like, that does not help his whole hero complex and his ego. Because it's like, what great dictator doesn't just come up with some powerful way of dominating the whole land without anyone's consent? I'm just saying, this dictatorship.
I'm not crazy about it either. This is another point against freaking Amryn.
I feel like Amryn brought a very strong point that healing would support it. The other two courts would go with it. It would keep Baron in place and keep him from being a naughty little Nelly.
But also, what if Rhysand turns out not to be a good ruler?
I mean, I don't think he's going to be a good ruler.
There's no checks and balances to it.
I would say that him resisting it makes me feel better about it. I feel like he knows that he wouldn't be an appropriate ruler. I mean, he also may not survive to be it either at this rate, so I think that might play into it as well.
Well, and it already kind of pushes back at his power, so I don't think he could use it anyway.
Right. But I do kind of like the idea of a High King of Prythian a little bit, especially in this circumstance when the Spring Court's falling apart, Baron is colluding with the Human Queen. The wall is gone, but there's no consensus on the treaty, and everyone has different opinions about it. I mean, I think that the proposal for a unified front is a very attractive proposition in this circumstance, just seeing how this country or this land is falling apart and how there is no consensus, and knowing how long this race lives, there probably won't be a consensus for hundreds of years. So I think to avoid war and to keep Baron in line, I think one High King could be a good thing.
I think it's a little premature of a conversation.
I just think that to say that Rhysand should be that might not be the right choice. I'm just saying the proposition, I think, has good bones, but I don't think that Rhysand is maybe the appropriate person for it.
If anything, I think Sarah J. Maas is setting it up for Feyre, right? Be having a little bit of power from every court.
That was my thought.
That seems to be the most logical.
Mm-hmm.
And she's probably the more level-headed one, because, I mean, let's be honest, this high lady role is kind of a figurehead still at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Rhys is still gonna, she gets a vote, there's an equity there, but she's not the final say, the way that Rhysand is.
It's not as equal as we think it is.
No, I don't think so at all. But yeah, I was really annoyed that Amryn was really pushy about this with Rhys.
Which was weird for Amryn.
Annoyingly so, yeah.
I didn't think that she would have any real interest in the politics of that.
No. But I do agree with you. I understand the sentiment, Sarah, of wanting some type of, not getting rid of the High Lords themselves, but having that more unified front.
Right.
I just can't wrap my head around how that would work. But I'd be very curious to see if... And yeah, it definitely should not be Rhysand.
But also, maybe just a High Queen of Prythian.
Love that. We love that.
Alright, Sam, want to take us away to the next section?
Yeah, so Nesta goes on her first official political duty with Cassian to meet with Eris. And they meet in the Spring Court because it's, deserted and kind of neutralish territory. And I love it because there's this crackpot theory pairing off Elaine.
Wait, what is crackpot theory?
It's just people call it I think crack ship is what I see too. Just one of those just out there relationship pairings.
Oh.
So it just feeds into the Elaine Tamlin crack ship theory when Nesta's like, Elaine would love it here in the spring court. And we're like, of course she would.
I thought of that instantly because I think it was either you or Quinlan who sent me a TikTok about how it's Elaine and Tamlin and the love triangle's Lucian and it's good, like that's the thing. And yeah, I thought of that instantly when I heard that line.
I mean, I don't think so, but I love the idea behind it. I love the sentiment behind it. I can't imagine that happens, but we will see. I would love to be surprised and that actually be it.
Well, and on this journey, they finally break the news to Eris about his soldiers. And he seems to be genuinely surprised about it and to have not known.
Yeah, and then he gets a little suspicious and he starts, blaming Cassian. He's like, you're the one that killed the rest of them, didn't you? How convenient you only left 2 of them alive. And Nesta puts him in his place, and we kind of love to see it, don't we?
Nesta's really good at politics. You gotta hand it to her. Her, like, quick thinking and wit is just on point.
Yeah, because she calls him out. She's like, if you're gonna go pointing your finger about your Autumn Court soldiers attacking us, like, why were they armed with ash arrows? Aren't those banned here? You know that they're deadly to each other. And he had nothing to say to it.
Yep, crickets.
So, gotta love quick thinking Nesta. And then right as they're about to leave, guess who shows up?
Oh,
Who is it, guys?
Tamlin. Or Tampon. It's Tampon. It's that time of the month. He's gotta make his appearance, and it's always awful.
But what's really dangerous about this is that this outs Eris. Like, this is a really, really dangerous moment for Tamlin to walk in on.
Oh yeah, Tamlin doesn't know that Eris is doing sneaky stuff with them.
Right.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so it was a very dangerous meeting, and you know what? Nesta uses all of her guilt and trauma of losing and anger towards losing her sister the way that she did in the first book and totally reams him a new one about it. And it was really, really satisfying.
Love to see it. She finally had her big sister moment.
Yeah.
Well, and now we need to make sure that he stays quiet about the whole Eris thing.
Who's gonna take, like, the lunatic High Lord running around in his beast form seriously?
Maybe, I think the only person who would be Baron, but that would be the problem, is if Baron finds out about Eris. Because Baron already wants the Spring Court, and so it makes sense that if the moment he knew that Eris was betraying him, and Tamlin just doesn't really care about anything and is just not doing well, that just gives Baron even more incentive to go ahead and make a move on the Spring Court to go ahead and build up his land in preparation for the fact that Eris is two-timing him.
That's fair.
I don't think Tamlin's that dumb to do that.
I don't think it's dumb. I think he would just accidentally say it or just be like, I don't feel like he would do it out of any intentions. I feel like he would just say it because he's in such a dark, empty place right now that none of this actually matters to him. I don't really think he's afraid of anyone, but I also just think that he doesn't really care about what's going on. Especially, like, look at how he's treating his own court.
That's true.
And he probably doesn't even realize that Baron wants to take over the Spring Court.
No, he would probably just assume that Baron was an ally as outliers to the rest of Prythian.
Yeah. Well, and that might be a thing for Tamlin, is if he wants to, in a political move, if he were actually smart, he would go to Baron because he doesn't have an army right now. And if Baron comes into the Spring Court, he would be bringing Autumn Court soldiers with him. And so even though Tamlin would have to forgive some of his power to Baron, he would have a defense against everybody else. So honestly, it would be the smart move for him to team up with Baron because no one else really takes him seriously.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, that's also assuming that Eris is not double-crossing Rhysand, which Nesta points out as well. She's like, how do we know that this isn't some elaborate plan? Because Asriel was shot with an ash arrow. How do we know that you're not stalking your soldiers with them?
Well, and even if he is, I would think if I were Eris that because he's two-timing right now, his father, I think that is probably a safety precaution. I think it would be stupid of him not to be prepared with crazy nuclear weapons.
It's true, I guess. Yeah, that's true. I don't
Anyway,
like.
so what happens next, guys?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think that Eris is double crossing? I mean, I know you know, but
I mean, I think he is with Baron, but I genuinely think that he would rather side with Rhysand and friends
Yeah.
than side with his father, because at least with Rhysand and friends, he has the ability to overthrow and get his own power.
I think he knows what a monster his dad is.
But also, I think he kind of craves the power of it. And the only way right now that he is able to come into any type of power is if Daddy goes away.
well, I also think he wouldn't be pushing the whole thing with more, like pushing his innocence with the whole thing with more if he didn't have good intentions, because I feel like that'd be kind of redundant, you know?
Or he's just the devil and very manipulative.
I hope not. I can't take any more manipulative people in this damn series, I tell you.
I'm looking forward to an Eris redemption arc, not gonna lie. I'm low-key, I'm there for it. I'm here for it. I wasn't the first time around.
I think he's fine. Mm-hmm.
When finally
he is.
Nesta gets a little homesick. Oh yeah, of course. I love Daddy Eris. He's so hot. I honestly would never think of him as hot until I saw that painting by Mads Official. That changed my mind completely. I'm here for it, 100%. Take me away. I wonder who his mate is.
You.
I want to know. Oh, obviously. Obviously. But yeah, while we're here, after all of this drama and commotion, Nesta is starting to feel homesick, which she's never felt before.
I like
And
that
she
she's
feels it.
like, well, no wonder she likes Valaris more after spending all this time in the spring court. I would like Valaris too.
I would like my old little shitty house in the woods better than the spring court.
Right. And then so what's really fun is Cassian, we get a little backstory in their next training session that he actually fought alongside the Valkyries multiple times.
Which is crazy that he's just now telling her. Why is he just now telling her this information?
I know, and Gwen's fangirling. She's so cute. I love her so much. Because he started picking up on their mind stilling / meditation techniques that they're utilizing. And he kind of goes into how he was one of the few Illyrians that wanted to fight alongside the Valkyries at their last battle.
Of course he was.
I know, right? Sweet baby. But of course he was vetoed out, and they literally knocked him out to shut him up. And that was the battle that the Valkyries got wiped out in. It's so devastating. What a heart-wrenching story.
He also had a lover that was a Valkyrie in that battle, right? Do you guys remember her name? I didn't write it down.
I think it gets mentioned later. I might have written. I don't think I wrote her name down, unfortunately. 'Cause she gets referenced in a little bit more detail later on. Yeah, it was really sad for him. Like, you just think about everything that he's gone through, all of his battles, all the loss.
Yeah. You forget how old he is, because he just comes across as such a frat boy.
So then, Cassian's like, I don't know their techniques, but if you find the research and want to bring something, we can start incorporating them. So Nesta and Gwen pretty much spearhead it, but Emery too, by proxy. Start pulling all of Meryl's training, or all of her, they turn it into training material, all of her research material, they start sifting through to make it training material for them. And then, so we finally hear back on Feyre's votes. Because, of course, again, Cassian gets called to the river house. This wasn't as bad of news, though. Yeah. It wasn't the worst appointment he's had. But Feyre says that yes, Nesta needs to be informed about her power, and Cassian is the one to offer to be that person to tell her about it. Because he kind of wants to time it out. He knows what she's like, right? It's not that he's trying to keep it from her further, but there's a time and place for everything, right? And spoiler alert, he does not do it right.
Cassian? No, never.
Tactless?
Bad
Never.
timing. Well, also, we know how Cassian doesn't have a good experience with timing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right off the mark.
Sometimes he's really quick to jump the gun, if you know what I'm saying.
And then this is when Sarah already touched on it a little bit, when Elaine tells the backstory about seducing a duke just to stick a middle finger at a girl that was bullying Elaine. Peak Nesta. She was 14 years old. It was so great. I loved it.
Well, but we also learned that Nesta she loves dancing and she loves music.
Because she's so artistic.
Oh my,
Deep,
don't
you
even
guys.
start, Spuds. You're so
She's so deep.
ruthless
She's just
about
like
this.
Bryce. I knew she had to have some deep quality
like
about her.
what other hobbies are these women going to have in this sort of like high fantasy?
Fucking running or something. Do like something. Be like, I really like going for a jog.
Like,
Like, who knows? Anything. Anyway.
okay, I'm sorry. You're just so mean about this. I mean, you have a point to a degree, but like...
It's fine. I'm right. Go on.
So then Cassian doesn't wait super long to withhold this information from Nesta, and really awkwardly, this is of course their first lesson that they're doing Valkyrie training, and Cassian awkwardly is like, Nesta, if you had a sword, what would you name it? Trying to segue the conversation. Oh, by the way, you make magical weapons. Congratulations.
It's such a bad segue. Because then she's like, I don't know. He's like, but if you could name a sword,
It's funny because I thought he was gonna he was trying to get her to name his dick. When I first read it, and I was like, what is he doing?
I thought his segue was going to be dumber than that. Like, it was going to be, she would have picked a name and Porpoise or whatever. And he's like, well, now that you've named this sword, you should know that it's already yours. Like, something dumb like that. And yeah, so yeah.
Or he should have just flat out told her.
I think you should have just flat out told her. It was just bad. It was real bad. But I
think, because of course, quick-witted Nesta immediately is like, why are you asking me this? This is weird. What's going on? So she's poking and prodding at this poor guy. And he just... Someone else take it away. I cringe thinking about how it all goes down.
So what Nesta hones in on, which is, I feel like this is so quintessentially Nesta, is she gets him to admit about the new dread trove that she inadvertently created. And he talks about how we made a vote and we chose to tell you. And she's like, we? Who is the we that we speak of?
Because I is not part of the we.
I don't remember beings in the we of it all. And of course, he's like, oh shit. Well, it was me and Asriel and Amrit, and she's like, so all of you got together to talk about me to decide if I was well enough, mentally stable enough to handle this information. You made a decision about me without me present. And then she's like, well, who voted against me? And he's like, oh crap. But he instead of just being like, no, I'm not going to tell you, he's like, well, I've already dug myself in this hole. I'm going to just start burying myself. And he tells her that Reese and Amron voted against her. And that's where she loses it. She storms off. He tries to talk to her and she just like locks herself in her room and waits till everyone goes away. And then she does the 10,000 steps. She is so angry and so much on a mission that she goes all the way down. Because I think the last time she did the steps, she made it to 6,000. She gets all the way to 10, opens the door, cobblestones, the town of Valaris, and she goes straight to Amron's apartment where she is having a time.
Sex with Varian. Imran is in the middle of something.
Yeah, in the middle of something. But Nesta doesn't care. She breaks down the door and she yells at her. And she tells Varian to leave, and he does reluctantly, but he also runs off to get Feyre. Then we see Nesta and Amron, and this is really the first time that we're seeing them really talk about what happened on the barge, which we know that something bad happened, but this is when we discover that Feyre had suggested to Amron that Nesta pick up training again because she's just drinking herself into a stupor all the time, and she's just not, they tried leaving her alone, and Amron fought for Nesta, but she agreed with Feyre that that's obviously not working, and Nesta loses it because she sees Amren is siding with Feyre and choosing Feyre over her. And it truly affected her. And of course, Amren and Amren fashion, instead of de-escalating the situation, just made it worse. And that's why Nesta stormed off the barge. But then Feyre comes in and she tries to break up the fight.
This part's hard.
This part was tough. This was really tough. Because Nesta's still pretty pissed and she's not getting anywhere with Amren.
She's also in like a level 9.
Yeah, but and Amren's not de-escalating. Like Amren's like, no, we were right. Just your shitty behavior right now, just your horrible behavior right now, just proves that you were not good to know enough. You are not ready to know about your dread trove. Like
she misses the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. No, she did not handle this well. She didn't de-escalate. So
she's just poking the fire.
Nesta was at an 8.5 by the time she encountered Amren, and it got to like 9.8 by the time Feyre came in. So we're just past the red line. And as Feyre comes in and tries to de-escalate the situation, this is where Nesta, in a fit of rage, discloses that who she thinks are her friends are not really her friends. Her whole inner circle has been hiding from her that her baby gonna kill her. And
how do you feel about Nesta saying this?
You know what, Swags, you go first.
I think Nesta did it with the best intentions, executed it poorly.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I agree with the conversation that Cassian and Feyre have later that we'll talk about, that she not only was watching Feyre be lied to her face, but then it also happened to her. And she's like, this is just not an okay way that you treat your friends and family.
It's toxic. She called him out.
Yeah.
It was not the best way to tell her, but I think that something that I struggle with in this book is how everyone reacts to Nesta telling Feyre and how they really shit on her when I'm like, you guys are the actual problem. You guys are the ones who did this in the first place, who created this issue, and you're mad at Nesta for outing it. Nesta's also, at the end of the day, her sister. She's blood family. That's something that none of you guys can relate to.
Yep.
I thought that scene was really interesting because I feel like, in a way, Nesta was being the big sister and very much identifying with Feyre in this situation. I agree with Sam. It was not executed well. It was executed in a fit of rage, so it didn't come out correctly, and it obviously really upset Feyre, and that was hard. Like, it was hard to watch it. I mean, I think it was a long overdue conversation. I understand to a degree why Rhys wanted to wait. He wanted to see what the options were and not put Feyre in paralyzing fear that her pregnancy is going to kill her, so until he could figure out a way. But I mean,
she's so close to being due. He's running out of time to tell her. Like, now she can't even appreciate it. It's like not telling someone that they have cancer.
Right. And it's past the point of chemo.
I think that's so unfair, and it's such bullshit. And I like reading this. I really, really, really struggled with how they all treated Nesta after this outburst, because although it wasn't the prettiest way to tell Feyre, at the end of the day, I respect Nesta because she actually had the balls to tell her.
Yeah.
Whereas like all of these other people were cowering in fear, and like they're the fucking problem. Nesta's not the problem for outing it. How she did it wasn't pretty, but she's not the problem in this instance. It's everybody else who has refused to tell Feyre what's going on with her body and her baby and her life.
Well, just because we forgot to cover it a couple sections ago, that we know that we're at the final point because even the Seraphim research that Rhysand did with Miriam and Dracon also came up fruitless. So they're like quite literally scraping the barrel at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, but also the time to tell Feyre is when they found out.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, do you guys think, I never asked this, it occurred to me now, do you guys think that in some way, shape, or form that Rhysand is keeping this from Feyre for his own, like, hero complex? Because he knows that he's gonna die, because he knows that Feyre's gonna die if she delivers this baby, and they have this pact. So he's like, oh, well, if I keep this, if I keep this from Feyre, then I'll also die and my sins will go with her and blah, 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 blah. Like,
But also, they're even more toxic because Farah and Raysan haven't even told their whole fucking friend group that they're both gonna die when one of them dies. Like, they're all just so full of themselves. I can't take it.
Well, and Feyre lets it slip in this conversation, but Nesta and Amber don't know anything about it, so they don't question her about it.
Yeah.
She does let it slip that the baby was going to kill them. She says that in this conversation, but they didn't question her about it because obviously she's very distraught. So I think they're just assuming she's not, like, she's processing everything.
Them could also mean her and the baby too.
Right,
but
right.
We as the reader, if we remember that, them can also be interpreted as the three of them.
Right, correct.
What I really love about the execution of this part is that when we see it from Cassian's perspective, he is watching Rhysand find out on the opposite side through Feyre, through their Daemati ability, and it just adds to the tension and the frustration and just like how pissed off you are at Rhysand. At least.
Well, and pretty much Rhysand tells Cassian that he needs to get Nesta the fuck away from there because he's gonna kill her.
Well, he said out of the city. Like, she needs to clear the area some 100,000 miles.
Little traumatic. You also maybe shouldn't kill your pregnant wife's sister out of, like, rage because she outed your lie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying.
I'm in trouble. I'm mad at you for getting me in trouble.
Yeah, essentially. And Cassian literally like swoops Nesta out of the streets.
I love it
after
how
she runs out of Amren's place.
She runs out of Amren's place to go get a drink, and I mean, honestly, I would have too.
She realized she fucked up.
And then Azriel was kind of on standby, and he had a pack for them, and they just bust out of there.
Can I ask you guys this? So, like, to the comment that she fucked up badly, like, did she really actually fuck up that bad?
I guess for her, she thinks she fucked up badly is the way I should have said it. Because, yeah, we agree for the most part. She didn't fuck up, but her devastation in seeing Feyre's reaction to that made her just crumble.
This part was so hard for me to read. I think it dug up. So, like, Carbs, I told you that there was one time that I cried in this book. It wasn't this section, but it's something that's coming up, and this was, like, the start of it. Mm-hmm. But I think I related so much to it in my personal life, just with, like, I feel like I see Nesta a lot in, like, my younger self and growing up and just, like, some of the ways that I would lash out, but also never being in tune with like other people and other people thinking that you should just operate a certain way. Right. But then me getting angry about the hypocrisy of a lot of the shit that was going on. I think that was just such a hard section to read. And then to see like how everyone treated her and then the self-deprecation of it. I mean, it was rough.
For my own personal, I mean, and Sam knows about this, I had a similar situation that Nesta had where information was kept from me because my family felt that I couldn't handle the truth. I did cry when I read the section. It was extremely difficult. It was...
I hate how they make her out to be the bad guy.
Yeah, and I naturally, when I found out this stuff, I reacted. It pissed me off because their whole thing was we knew you wouldn't handle it well. So when I finally found out what my family was keeping from me, and I reacted really upset, like, see, we knew you would act this way.
But I'm not mad about that. Right. I'm mad about you guys.
I'm mad about your decision to not keep me in the loop with all of the, like, your deliberate decision to cut me out of this conversation that pertains to me and my life and how I made choices. Like, I had a really difficult...
No, I completely agree. Yeah. It was hard reading this.
I really struggled reading this section. It broke my heart. It really, really did. And I think it's a gray area because I don't like how Nesta handled this. I think it could have been handled differently, but I also don't mind how she did it either. I think it had to happen. It was a long overdue conversation, which just adds to the tension and the feelings of distraught when it comes to this conversation. Like, it just adds the intensity of it, but I don't think it was the wrong thing to do as a whole. I think how it was handled was poorly executed.
When she finally outed it, I felt like it was interesting because my first perception of it was like, finally someone had the balls to say it. And I
Right.
was like really rooting for Nesta for saying it. And then watching everyone just lose their whole shit over it was a moment where I had viewed it a different way, where I was like, I wasn't viewing it that way until everyone else's reaction. And then that inner shame comes in, and you're like, oh, I did a bad thing or whatever. But it's like, had they not reacted the way they did, I would have not felt any type of sadness or like Nesta had handled it poorly.
For Rhysand to be like, get her out of the city because I'm gonna kill her, I thought like it instantly validated her for me, because he has no right,
Mhm.
like he has no right to be upset with Nesta. Yes, she didn't handle it well, and it was harsh, and how it came, the delivery of it was not great, but this is his fault. For him to be like, you got me in trouble, I'm mad at you, is so immature, and it pissed me off. It pissed me off to no end.
And it's kind of frustrating to have to use Cassian as the buffer
Hmm.
because, I mean, Cassian and Rhysand have a 500-year history, and clearly Cassian and Nesta have formed their own relationship, and it's not fair for him. He's having to mediate, and that's not his job anymore. Like, he happily took on the training, helping Nesta get out of her head, but this is like way above his pay grade, in my opinion, too.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally.
it's not his place. But also, like, in the situation, you think that everyone would just, like, literally fuck off and let Nesta and Feyre talk by themselves together as
Yes.
sisters. Like, Reese threatening her to kill her and stuff and being like, she needs to get far the fuck away from this place and da da da. That should have been a moment where Feyre's like, Nesta, let's go for a walk or whatever. And like she processes it on her own time. But that, how is that supposed to make Feyre feel any better about the situation with everyone throwing gasoline on the fire and being like, I'm gonna kill your sister, she needs to get away,
Yeah.
and now I have to go do this, this, and this. I think that they handled that situation so much more poorly than anything Nesta did in that room.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And then poor Feyre having to also kind of mediate too on the opposite end. So Cassian's kind of like Nesta's mediator and Feyre's being Rhysand's.
Hmm.
She's communicating with Cassian like, hey, where did you guys go? Rhys completely overreacted, that he had no right to say what he said about Nesta, and that even though he told them to leave, that they should come back.
And this
You
is
know,
where
and
I get pissed off at Cassian.
why, for not bringing Nesta back?
Well, because he made the choice and was like, no, I'm gonna let her tough it out for a few days.
Oh, I actually thought that was a good thing.
I did too.
But I think that that also, it's again another situation where Nesta's not in the say or in control. It's forcing her to do something that she's not aware of. And in this moment, she's so self loathing. And for him to push her, I understand what they're doing, but also the lack of communication is such trash.
That's fair.
That's fair. Actually, no, that's a really good point. I get.
Like, she's at one of her lowest points ever after this has happened. And she probably feels like the worst person alive. You thought her self loathing was bad before. In this moment, with everyone attacking her and like threatening to kill her, and she's just upset someone who's the closest to her sister. And then Cassian being like, no, I'm gonna make her tough it out or whatever, and I'm gonna push her to do this and not tell her. Watching how fucking broken she is such an asshole move.
My thought on this wasn't necessarily that. It was, I certainly felt Nesta was at rock bottom mentally. I don't really think she was in a place to make decisions. I just got this sense that Cassian was like, I don't think Nesta can really process what she did. So I'm just going to take her out of that environment and
But
just.
he's so cold to her. Like, everything about this whole situation breaks my heart. He's cold, he's forcing her to do something, and like, there's no breathing room. He makes her carry gear. She's walking for days on end, not talking.
I didn't see it as being cold towards her. I saw it as being, I think, even keel. I just, it's hard because I feel like Nesta is so, she feeds off of such bad energy, and
And he's not helping.
but he's also not adding gas to the fire. I was under the impression that he was staying very like monotone and like I'm not like just consistent with his emotion. Like that was my sense of how he was handling it. Like I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not going to give you any ammo or anything to like take and twist or misinterpret. I'm just going to stay as like say what absolutely needs to be said. I mean, and technically like
I
he
mean,
gave her like I mean she had the canteen, she just wasn't drinking. She was in such a state of shock and trying to process everything emotionally that she just wasn't taking care of herself. I mean, there's other elements to it, be like staying away from the fire that he didn't understand, but I thought this was a way for her to kind of have a blank slate. And I don't really know if I'm articulating this very well.
well, so I'll go ahead and say it. This is the chapter that I cried like a baby reading. And it's because of just like the combination of everything. But I think something that I really struggled with reading this is just coming from someone who had my lowest point and ended up having to go to rehab and stuff. Like, there were so many people in my life who, when I was at my lowest point, were pushing me in certain directions. And I think that those are some of the worst points in my life because it was like stuff that I wasn't ready for. I think that in order to heal, people have to come to the decision on their own terms. So what if she was like numb for a few days or whatever? The fact that you're pushing her to do something and she's like a walking skeleton, she's not drinking water, she's not functioning, I don't think that was the right way to heal her. And I understand that, oh, she overcomes this mountain and this physical turmoil and stuff, but in reality, life really doesn't work that way. And so I guess it was just heartbreaking because like I felt that low before of just like complete, I don't even know what you would call it, like suicidal, numb, empty feelings and feeling like this ultimate self-loathing. And then to see someone who she's built a relationship with, that she, as much as they like do their joking bickering back and forth, she feels safe with that person. To see him so monotone, like it came across as cold, and it was heartbreaking because I would be like in the situation where when I finally came to you and Sam and was like, I do you guys think I need to do this? I was ready to hear what I needed to hear. But like, had you guys gone into that situation treating me the way that Cassian did, I probably would have just died. But like, it just makes me think of like how cold that was to do to her. Like, it's so easy for people to kick others when they're down and to like not understand what they're going through. But it's like the lack of sympathy for anything.
Yeah, I think this is the flip side to what Nesta did to Feyre, is that the intention behind it is, I think, there, that Cassian wasn't I don't think, because I wrote it in the notes that Cassian went full general mode. Like, he knew that Nesta was going to have her breakdown. He knew, but I just don't think he read the situation correctly. I think he did what he thought would be best for her in that moment and realized when she passed out that he made the wrong choice. Because I think, while I agree with you not to force anybody into a situation they shouldn't be in, I think taking Nesta out of Valaris was the right move.
Oh,
But
yeah. She didn't need to be around those people.
no, so I'm like kind of torn there when it comes to that, just because, on the flip side, Cassie was also seeing Nesta using exercise as a way to clear her mind. She was doing the stairs every time she was having a moment, right? So I wonder if it was almost slightly meant as a punishment, but also knowing that it would be a good idea to clear her head, to be out there. And also the scope of mountains that they went on in ancient times was rumored to be a source of healing. So I think he really kind of took it and just kind of said, like, fuck it, let's see what happens. But yeah, I don't think they needed to walk 12 hours every day.
He could have maybe said what they were doing at the beginning.
Yeah.
Just like the informed knowledge of it would have been really nice.
Yeah.
Because like here she's feeling numb. She thinks that she's out of the city because Reese is going to kill her. She thinks that her sister fucking hates her because Cassian hasn't shared that Feyre forgives her. So like there's that missing piece of information. Yeah, and is, like, grateful. So, like, she has this burden of thinking that her sister, like, hates her. Her brother-in-law wants to kill her. Like, there are so many pieces of this that are, like, adding into the self-loathing that weren't necessary in this healing process.
Mm-hmm.
He could have been like, "Hey, Feyre forgives you, but, like, let's take some time, and, like, we're gonna go on this walk."
Yeah, that's fair.
It was just so fucked up. And, like, I think it was good for her, but also at the same time, like, just being in that position before, I think I would have broken just as hard as she had.
Yeah.
And I just, like, remember feeling that feeling was really difficult when reading it.
Oh, I'm sure. It's a devastating section, and to feel a personal connection to it, I couldn't imagine. But after, days of them hiking without necessarily knowing what was happening, only
Yeah.
being half present, her body, she just is exhausted. She's not drinking enough water. She faints, and then her and Cassian have a moment where she finally kind of breaks down this emotional dam that she's been building up since her father died.
When he finally figures out about the fire and why she can't go anywhere near it.
Right, confirming what he has already been noticing. And then, yeah, that, she, I think Tamlin kind of stirred up, meeting Tamlin for the first time, or I guess again, more recently, kind of stirred up her sisterly guilt about letting Feyre run off like that she was the breadwinner of the sisters, and how she wasn't doing it to screw Feyre over. She was just like, Dad, do something. Like, why can't you just, like, get off your ass and do what you need to do for your 3 starving daughters?
And she also blames him for the mother's death, too.
Yep, it's a lot. So she's got the guilt of letting her father die, thinking that she should have saved him, the guilt of letting her sister take care of them for so long and then disappearing because of that, watching Elaine go in the cauldron and disappear. Like, it is just guilt upon guilt upon guilt.
Well, now she thinks Feyre hates her.
Right.
So, like, add the icing on the cake.
And, Cassian's like, you're going to take as long as you need. You just can't sit in those feelings. Like, because he was talking about how long, he referenced that it took him a long time to get over his mother's death and all the traumas that he has personally dealt with. And I mean, he's 500 years in, he's still here. So I think that was kind of the reminder and inspiration that Nesta needed.
The first person to finally tell her that she's allowed to do something at her own pace.
Yes.
I just wish that conversation would have happened at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was also my favorite part about this section, because I cried like a baby as well. Because we talked about this when Nesta was first sent to the House of Wind, how this decision was made without her, and she really she wasn't given the grace to do things on her own time. And I agree, like, I don't like throughout this journey Nesta was forced into her own self-care, and that she wasn't given this time to sort it out on her own. And for Cassian to say, like, not only did he say she can do it in her own time, but she can also do it her own way. Like, she doesn't have to be sweet Feyre or Elaine and be nice to the inner circle. She could still be her spicy, get shit done herself in person. Like, she doesn't have to change her personality to match this idea of what getting better looks like. She doesn't have to change herself, but she doesn't have to sit in these negative feelings, like you said, Sam. She can stay who she is at her very core, and she can take as long as she wants. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, I found that whole message very, very meaningful and really important. And I was very touched by that conversation.
Yeah, it definitely came around. And then they have sex.
You do?
Once they finally get to the summit. I don't think we're there yet, though.
No. It's such a funny descriptor of how they spend their days on the hike. It's in the next chapter.
For real.
You'll love it, Sarah.
I'm excited.
So our next section, we are going to read all of part 3, which is Valkyrie. And that is going to be chapters 51 to 63.
Oh, I'm so excited. This book just keeps getting better and better.
It really does. It's really, really good. I'm curious to see obviously them summit this mountain now, but
Sorry. Spoiler alert.
but also like how Nesta and Rhysand sort of work things out when she returns to Valaris. We still don't, if Brienne has the crown, we don't know where the harp is, what they're gonna do with the new Dread Trove. Am I missing any other like big loose ends?
Nah,
No.
let's go ahead and end
Those
it.
are the big ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, we know what we're doing. We know where we are. We know where we're going. Let's send us off.
All right.
Bye.
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 Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Instagram at confessionstand_podcast for any show updates. Feel free to give us a follow on our Goodreads too to see what we're currently up to. That link is in our bio.
Bye.
Bye.